invited you. Hello.
Hello.
How are you?
I'm fine. Can you hear me fine?
Yes. Can you hear me fine?
Yeah, I can hear you perfect. Perfect sound. So, I'm still after all these months, still trying to make sure my tech is okay.
Okay. Yeah. Well, thank you for joining me and welcome everybody. People. It's saying that Instagram is telling everybody that I'm live, so we should get some people joining soon. Hi, the Fizbit. Um, Thank you. Welcome. We have privacy price tag. Hi everyone. Thank you so much for joining. And Jana, if you could either put any information like about your book or your tag, like
Sure.
your name, and then I'll ping it to the comments so that we can, as people come, they'll see um, your information. So yeah, I was just giving a small introduction of myself. My name is Judith. I am an author. My debut book is called Breakthrough to New Beginnings. It is a poetry book, and it's available out, in Barnes and Nobles, Amazon, and other bookstores. So if anybody's interested, please check it out. And I'm also a soon-to-be children's book author. I have more to come on that, so please stay tuned. I'm very excited. But today is all about Miss Jana Jones. She is the author of um, what? I'm sorry. I was just saying your book Vivid.
hmm
Yeah. So just give us a little introduction of yourself, and then after that we can go ahead and talk about your book.
Sure, sure. So my name is Jana Jones. I am a new author, debut author. My novel Vivid came out this past May. And so avid reader, long time reader, I have a long lasting love for the library. So I feel like it was only a matter of time before my name was somewhere in the library too as an author. So it was just, you know, the progression of life. But like I said, I'm a new author. I've worked primarily in the nonprofit and public service sectors. That's where my background is, and it also informs a lot of my writing as far as engaging with people, working with individuals to better their lives, and I kind of see things from different angles as an administrator and as a person from a particular background who, needed services, who received a lot of support and services growing up. So I've seen that from both sides, and it comes out in my writing. But yes, it's my first novel. It won't be my last. I'm actually working on some projects right now. So, I'm glad that this particular story was my first out, because it meant a lot to me. So I'm glad that um, this book is my first.
Okay. Well, you know, glad that you put out your first book. Um, how I'm gonna ask you what the book is. To
Mhm.
tell us a little bit about the book. But before we even get to that, like, how did you feel about publishing your first book, the publishing process? What was it like for you, the experience?
I've discussed this in previous interviews, but it's been like a trial by fire. You really have to be ready, be ready as in terms of, because once you are an indie author, an indie publisher, you oversee everything from the formatting to the editing to book covers, and you're working with vendors who can do certain services, but you have to kind of see, okay, am I getting my money's worth? Is this the right, software to use? I've had a crash course on book formatting software. I've had to, how your book is even sized. Like if it's going to be a 5.5 by 8.5 or a 4 by 5, like everything is a factor, because like libraries and bookstores, your book can't be but so big. So I say all of that to say that it's been an experience, but I'm grateful for it. I'm very grateful for it because that's what you have to do if you want your story out into the world. You have to make sure that what you're doing is professionally done, that it's put together with care, because I feel like you owe it to an author, owes it to themselves and also to their characters to make sure that the final product is worthy and is something that the readers will enjoy. So it's definitely a learning process.
Yes, I agree. As an indie author myself, I
Hmm.
definitely agree. You have to do a lot of research, and there are a lot of like um, learning in the process, and you know, taking the curbs as as you go about it. So, with that experience, does that make you, feel like maybe you would one day want to be traditionally published, or are you gonna um, continue with the indie route?
Well, I leave the door open. I leave the door open as far as traditionally published versus indie published. As I'll see what the road holds for me. I have more stories, and I want them to have as wide of a reach as possible. So whichever route helps me with that is where I want to go.
Mm, yeah, sounds perfect. Okay, so now tell us a little bit about your book. I see that it takes place in Baltimore. Is that where you're
Yeah.
from? Is that, why Baltimore? And
Yes, ma'am. So I'm a Baltimore native. I've kind of lived all around, but Baltimore was where I was born and raised, West Baltimore. And with Vivid, it was a special story for me because it's inspired by actual events. So we're journeying with a young mother who comes up to Baltimore from North Carolina. So I wanted to have that element because there's like a migration relationship between Baltimore City and points further south. So Virginia, North Carolina, South Carolina. So I wanted that element to be in Vivid as well. But she comes to her new city and essentially is looking for a fresh start. And it's her and her 3 children. She moves in with family. And in living in Baltimore, she experiences the big city for the first time and all that means. So you see like the activity and the bright lights and the new scenery, but also we learn the not so great side, which in this case is the drug scene in the city of Baltimore, which was a factor back then. So we're talking in early 90s. So Sherry's the mother, and she's seeing, the not so great side of Baltimore City to the point where she's, reconsidering did I make the right choice. But she's determined to power through, and she makes other decisions, makes other choices because she still wants to stay in Baltimore. But in making alternate plans, she and her children wind up getting caught up in an ethical, like medical whirlwind. Again, inspired by actual events. So in Vivid, we watch a mother navigate through her own like family dynamics and such. But we also walk with her as she and her children and members of the community, they rallied together to take on systemic violence and unethical medical practices. And they're really finding their own power, they're finding their own voice, and Vivid is a journey with that. And one thing I noticed that you mentioned that you're going to write a children's book, and most of the authors you showcase are children's book authors. And although Vivid is a novel, it's an adult novel, the story itself really pulled. It really is about children. It's about children. It's about child development and the factors that people might not think about that impact child development, as far as cognitive development, neurological, the factors that can impact a child's development that's beyond what them or their parents can really, um, prepare for. So with Vivid, we see a group of people who are up against some really intense, you know, um, it's an intense mountain to climb, but we're with them as they find a way to triumph over that.
Okay, wow. Wow, what a wonderful story it sounds
Hmm.
like. Like,
Yeah.
um, was this inspired by, um, something that you've experienced in real life or someone around you?
Right. So I didn't directly experience it, but it was something that, as a Baltimorean of a certain age, you just grew up knowing about like lead exposure, lead paint poisoning. You would see the commercials on TV from the lawyers. If you or your child had been exposed to lead, call 444, and we can get you a settlement. And you grew up seeing that stuff. I mean, with everything else. So it was always something that was known in the city, but not something that was really talked about at length. I don't know if you remember the young man Freddie Gray from a few years ago in Baltimore. So Freddie Gray and his sibling, when they were children, they lived in a home that had very high levels of lead. So they actually received a substantial settlement because of the lead exposure and what that did to them as far as their brain development. So, it's the things that people may be aware of in passing, but this particular issue impacted so many people and it impacted so many children. And the long term effects, I don't know if they're really even discussed like that. So, Vivid, as a work of fiction, Vivid is designed to kind of start the conversation, raise awareness about this issue.
Yes, that's absolutely just powerful, and it's one of the best ways to, like things that sometimes government and people in power, like they try to sweep under the rug and make us forget. Like books, will always, like, as long as people write them in books, we'll always like remember and just can't
Yeah,
erase, our history. So that, I think that's a very powerful thing.
yeah,
Yeah.
I think so. Something that it will stay with you.
Hmm. And so, without spoiling the ending,
Mhm.
is it that it does it have a happy ending?
It has a realistic ending. From what I have been told, because I get emails and I get DMs, um, there is a plot twist at the end. There is, but the story itself has a hopeful ending. So you can walk away. You'll still likely feel a way about the plot twist because I get a lot of emails like, why did you had this character doing so and so. So, but I felt like it was a realistic ending. But even with that, it's hopeful. So I don't make anyone nervous. It's a good book. It'll sit with you. The book will sit with you. The story will sit with you. But it just shows the triumphs of everyday life. I wanted this story to be a story about everyday people. This can easily be someone that you know at work. Sherry and her family and her friends can be someone that you go to church with. This is everyday circumstances. It's not something, well, she made that up and she pulled that. Once you read this book, you're going to see a lot of people that you know in this book because that's really what I wanted to pull from just everyday life and just the triumphs and just the tribulations that we deal with in everyday life. So that's what Vivid really is.
Wow. Yeah. You mentioned earlier that, so the mother with her three children moved to Baltimore, and this is their first time in a big city.
Hmm.
Um, and so it comes with a whole lot of, shock and culture like differences and things like that. And you've mentioned that you yourself, you've moved around a little bit as well.
Mhm.
So how does like your experiences as far as like packing up and then moving to a new city affected you?
That's a great question. So I call her my ancestral godmother, but I pull a lot from Zora Neale Hurston in that, I know she was an anthropologist and formally trained. I'm not that, but I'm the kind of person I like to pull from wherever I'm living at the time and learn about the culture, learn about just the different intricacies that take place in every different space that you're in, just the sayings and the lingo and the types of food that are eaten and music. And I, I've always been very receptive to just different types of cultures because I just wanted to see what all was out there, and that ties back to me being an avid reader. Just reading so much. I used to actually even read like atlases and maps. So I would read those too and look through them and just say, okay, I want to go to this country. I want to visit this state. I just always had a mind to explore and just see what else is out there. Um, and in doing that and coming across, different people and with different backgrounds, when I come back home to Baltimore, it allows me to kind of see the city with new eyes because I feel sometimes if you're in a place too long, you after a while everything kind of blurs together and you can see, oh, I didn't know that this, like, just maybe about 2 weeks ago I was with my cousins and I came across like a park area, like a little fishing hole park space, and I'm like, how long has this been here? Like, I'm of my age, and like, is this a new like fishing spot in the city, which I thought was so cool. But it's always good, in my opinion, to leave yourself open to experiencing walks from all over. It enriches you, it adds to you, and I feel like it makes your world so much larger. So to tie it back to Vivid, we have Sherry who is engaging with the new culture. Culture shock is very real, but what's motivating her is her desire and her vision for her children and knowing that she wants more for them. So she's able to overcome any type of culture jolts because her goal is to really um, make sure that her children have the widest world as possible.
Okay, wow, nice. That's wonderful. I know Baltimore has a very distinct culture and accent, and I hear the food
Yes,
too. So
it's
it's like
true.
definitely on my list of places that I have to visit.
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah, cool. So, um, I know, is this gonna be just a standalone book, or have you thought about making it into a series or anything like that?
That's a great question. And actually, I don't have follow-up book plans now for Vivid, but it can be a part two. And I realized that after I had finished writing and I got to the end, and I said, okay, so then I could write a second book to this. Like, I didn't intend, that wasn't my intention when I finished, to have the story end, like wrap up the way it wrapped up. I had the ending, but even with the ending, it could be a part two. So I'll leave the door open. I won't completely shut it because there's definitely, open space to revisit the characters and revisit the family and kind of pick up from where Vivid closed out. So we'll see.
Okay, nice. That would be interesting to see.
Yeah.
Um, okay, so you also earlier you mentioned about making sure that your book is right, from the right cover to the right designs and the editing process. Um, how was like me? Some people love editing their work. Some people find it like that's the part that they don't like. Are you one of those authors? Like, how is editing for you?
Well, I actually I sent that out. I went and I went to Upwork and I went right and I hired editors. And a good sister friend of mine, she was my first editor. She was like a line editor for me, like last year. She was the first person that I showed my entire book to. I just was still a little bit cagey, and I didn't know yet if I was going to release it. And I sent it to her. I said, "Here's my manuscript, check it out." And she was like, "Jana, this is great." And she was the first person to read through it and do the edits and reword this or break this out, put this in dialogue. So she was the first editor, and then after she reviewed it, I went and I hired more editors. So I didn't even want to. I can do a quick once over check as far as just a walkthrough, but it had gotten to the point where I had seen the words so much to I couldn't really see any mistakes anymore, because after a while it starts blurring together. So I said, okay, I can't look at this. I need to make sure this is properly done. So I went and I hired editors and let them edit, and I would chime in and make my adjustments, but I put it in their hands because
Okay.
I didn't want to, you know,
Yeah.
cause any traffic jams.
Yes. Welcome, Words and Ciphers. Thank you for joining us.
Hi.
Yeah. So overall, how long did the process take you from like doing the first draft to the editing and then the cover,
Yeah.
and publishing?
So I actually started writing Vivid in October of 2014. And I was writing. Then I stopped. And I stopped and I let it sit for about like 5 years. I picked Vivid back up in 2020, in like the end of January, early February. I picked it back up again and really just got right to it. And the story really like poured out of me at this point. It wasn't a start and stop and start and stop. It was as if the characters had just taken over and was like, listen, we're going to tell this story and you just type. So that's really what it was. I was in like a blitz from like February all through the summer of 2020. And I wrapped up Vivid at the beginning of September. And that's when I got into the editing process. Um, so it was being edited from September up through, I think we wrapped in February. While that was going on, I was working on the cover and that was really a big deal for me. I wanted to make sure the cover was something that stood out, that people would remember. So I was just Googling around for cover artists, and I found one online. And I said, okay, I like your work. Let's work together. So we were just kind of going back and forth, exchanging ideas, and he would give me like a mock-up, and I would look at it and say, okay, I wanted this color, or do this or do that. So we were doing that for a few months, and I finally got my cover in March. So from that point on, you're formatting it, you're putting it up on Amazon and Ingram Spark to make sure that everything is out, was going to be out in time for my release date. There was some down to the wire last minute like fires, like oh my gosh, but they were small. They were small, so we were able to get it off and running on May 4th. So
Yeah, I think that could be also part of the fun, just the unexpected things happen.
oh yeah, definitely.
You're like, oh, yeah, I got through this, and now it's like, it's still good. It's still out.
It keeps you on your toes for sure.
Yeah. Um, Thank you for answering that. Um, so my next question is like, if there was anything that you could either change in the book, would you? Because I ask this question because it always happens to me when I write something, and even when I'm like, okay, this is the last edit, and it's perfect or whatever. Like I always somehow find a way that something that I want to like either change or add or anything like that.
Whew. Let me think, because
I change my endings so often, so I'm always changing my endings and
yeah, well, With editing though, you could be editing for a long time because you see something and you go, okay, I want this change from this city to that city, or make her live in Detroit, or make her live in Newark, or there's so many things to the point where you have to really kind of silence your mind and go, okay, no more changes, no more, leave it the way it is, don't touch anything, because with the type of mind that I have, I could easily have been editing for years on end about just making these small changes. And that just comes from a very warped sense of wanting to be perfect, and we can't be that. So, but as far as if I have to make any changes in Vivid, um, I can't think of any. And that's not to say that my book is the best out, because it's not. It's a good read, but it's not a perfect read. But I can't think of anything that I would want to change with this book. I think I gave the readers my best push. And I can't make any changes at this point.
Nice. Okay, good. So, speaking of readers, like who did you write this book for? Like, who did you picture your audience to be?
That's a good question, because I had a particular, I guess, a person in mind, and that would be, well, let me rephrase that. I wrote the book for everyone, but as far as like the references that I put a lot of like Baltimore references from a certain time period, which means you can be a Baltimorean born and raised and be like 20, and some references in this book you're not going to get because it was written by a Baltimorean, myself, of a certain age. So I feel like when it comes to certain references, they may be understood more if you're, from, I guess my similar background, a Baltimorean of, a certain age, you might get it. But even if you don't, it doesn't slow the story down. The story is fully functional, even if some of the, oh, okay, I remember that, or I know this building, or I know this song. You might not know any of it, but the way the story is pulled together, that won't even be a factor, which is a good thing. Because a lot of the feedback and emails that I've gotten from Vivid, I've gotten emails from folks from Canada, all over. And it's really resonated with them, and I'm just like, oh, this is great, because people all over are going to read your books and they're going to read your stories, but the question for me always is, will they get what I'm saying? Will they get the story? Will they get it? And I'm very happy, because I've gotten overwhelmingly great feedback about Vivid from all over. So, and I'm grateful for that. I'm glad that the story was bigger than maybe I thought, or I gave it credit for being.
Okay, wow, nice.
Yeah.
Thank you for answering that again.
Yeah.
So I know this is called Five Questions with the Writer, and I always end up asking way more than five questions.
This has been great.
Yeah, I'm enjoying it. Um, but my last question is, what advice would you give someone who is either a new writer or someone who hasn't been published yet, but who's thinking about becoming an indie published author?
I would say, don't give up. Don't take rejection personal. Your story is an important story, and it needs to come through you. You might feel like, well, who am I? Nobody wants to read what I have to write, or no one's checking for me, and that's not true. If you have a story that's been sitting with you, that's a sign that it needs to be released. So don't ask any questions. Just say, you know what, this is my assignment. My assignment is to get this story out. Don't beat yourself up. You know, don't feel like, okay, I have to write this particular way in order for my words to be received. No, have your own style, have your own lane. That's okay. And don't feel like, everyone just knows so much more than you do. No, everyone is winging it. I've learned that we are all winging it, and just give yourself some grace. Grace is very, very important. Give yourself some grace while you're going through this process. Don't feel like you have a time clock behind you where, I have to have this milestone by this time and it has to be done by this point. No, give yourself some grace, give yourself some breathing room, but still make sure you get your story out. That's the most important thing.
Yes, it's important, especially right now. People are craving, stories to read,
Hmm.
especially stories from diverse, groups and people.
Yeah.
So I definitely agree with you on that. Hi, President Manhattan, and we have Sister Goose. Thank you guys for joining us.
Hey, folks.
Unfortunately, we're just writing down, but this has been a really great interview and chat with author Jana Jones, author of Vivid, a novel that is out now on Amazon. And besides Amazon, where else can people get it?
Sure, you can get Vivid also at barnesandnoble.com. You can get it at target.com. Also, there's some indie booksellers at secondsale.com. Also sells Vivid if you want to order from my indie provider.
Okay, nice. Do you have a website?
Yeah, so my website is janajjones.com. So that's like my author website. You can also find me on social media at Written by Jana on Twitter and also on Instagram.
Okay, perfect. Yeah,
Yay.
so thank you, you guys who are just joining us. If you missed it, the live will be saved, so please check it out later. Um, and also check out Jenna's book. Her Instagram handle is pinned in the comments, so
Yes,
go ahead and check it out as
visit.
well.